more answers than you know.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to What's the Obsession. I'm Kelly, the creator of this true crime channel that covers a number of true crime cases. I just got back into discussing the IDAHO4 case, or what will be the state of Idaho versus Bryan Kohberger trial that we just found out is going to begin in the summer of 2025. It seems like such a long way away. I know many of us are very eager for that trial to begin, and we just want to know everything that there is to know about this case. Due to the strict and broad gag order, details about this case have remained a mystery, which has led to a lot of questions, curiosities that we all have about this case. Among those curiosities, one of the top ones has to be what was going on with the surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke, during the time of the attack that took the lives of their roommates, Madison Mogan, Kelly Gonzalez, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. This question remains out there because we know so little. We want to know, what did Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke witness in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. More is known about Dylan Mortensen's experience due to what is said in the probable cause affidavit, where we know Dylan Mortensen reports to law enforcement early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. One of the biggest questions about the two roommates in general is, what were they doing during the time of the attacks? Were they in communication with each other? Were they texting? Were they talking? Were they in communication at all? We know that Dylan Mortensen was awake and aware because of what is said in the probable cause affidavit, but we wonder, is Bethany Funke sleeping? Did she see anything that's just not mentioned in the PCA? Was she in contact with Dylan Mortensen? And if they were in contact, what exactly were the two saying? Understanding the answer to this question would give us an idea of what Bethany and Dylan's forthcoming testimony would be in the upcoming trial of Bryan Kohberger that may lend towards his innocence or guilt. So why is there such a great curiosity about what Dylan and Bethany experienced on that evening or that early morning? Well, obviously because they are the two surviving roommates. Also, because of the gag order, there is very little known about their experience at all. And then there is also the issue that nobody can ignore about the 8-hour time lapse between the time of the attacks and the time 911 was called to report the crime. This video is going to take a look at everything we know about what did Bethany and Dylan hear and see. What do I on this channel know from being in communication with a couple of sources very close to this tragedy, and what evidence is out there corroborating this story? So let's talk about it. Before we dive into this topic, we're going to have to take a trip back in time to April of 2023, when Bryan Kohberger's defense team filed a motion to compel Bethany Funke's testimony in a pre-trial hearing procedure. And, well, do y'all remember how that went down? Than reading the entire legal document, because that gets a little dry, I'm just going to read a portion of a Newsweek article that came out after this motion was filed. It says, the New York Times obtained court documents filed by Kohberger's legal team this weekend, which included sections from Richard Batanti, a criminal investigator hired by the defense. In the document, Batanti says that during the course of his investigation, he learned that Funke has information related to the charges filed against Kohberger. Goes on to say, portions of the information Ms. Funke has is exculpatory to the defendant. Ms. Funke's information is unique to her experience and cannot be provided by another witness. Bethany Funke resides in the state of Nevada, and it is necessary to subpoena this witness because the witness's testimony is material and necessary to this case. In response, attorneys for Funke filed a motion disputing many of the claims made by Kohberger's legal team, saying, there is no authority for an Idaho criminal defendant to summon a Nevada witness to Idaho for a preliminary hearing. There's also no authority for an Idaho criminal defendant to summon a Nevada witness to an Idaho matter without a hearing, and there is no authority to summon a Nevada witness to an Idaho matter without a Nevada judge making a finding of materiality, necessity, and the lack of undue hardship. So the preliminary hearing never actually went down, and if it did, it's clear that Bethany Funke's team did not want her to have to testify in that preliminary hearing. Now, why didn't the preliminary hearing go down? Well, it's because a secret grand jury was convened, and that grand jury did indict Bryan Kohberger, who had been charged with the 4 fatal stabbings. Now, let's take a look at what we do know and what we do not know about Bethany Funke's experience that night, based on what's been released in the probable cause affidavit, because that's all that we really have in light of the broad and strict gag order put forth by Judge. Although the probable cause affidavit did not say much about Bethany Funke's testimony other than to say where she was that evening and that she was with Ethan and Xana from 9 p.m. to 1:45 a.m. at the Sigma Chi house, what Bethany Funke had to contribute to the investigation was critical, because the investigators say that they honed in on the time frame, the 25-minute window of time during which the tragedies occurred due to these 3 factors. Number 1, Dylan Mortensen's statements to investigators. Number 2, forensic downloads of Dylan and Bethany's phones. And number 3, the video of the car in the area that appeared unusual. Considering we know a decent amount about Dylan Mortensen's statements to the investigators through the probable cause affidavit, and we know a decent amount about the surveillance video of the white Hyundai Elantra in the 1122 King Road area that appeared unusual, the only one of these 3 factors that we really know nothing about is the forensic download of Dylan and Bethany's phones. And we know that Dylan Mortensen was awake around the time that the tragedy occurred due to her statements in the probable cause affidavit and the timeline that's been provided by authorities. What we have not known is if Bethany Funke was awake around that time or not, and if she was active on her phone, if she was up and aware of what was going on, or if she was just in the house and she was asleep. Since only Dylan Mortensen's testimony appears in the probable cause affidavit regarding what she heard and saw around the time of the tragedy, it might lead one to believe that Bethany Funke was downstairs and sound asleep and she didn't hear or see anything at all. This is where the defense's motion from April of 2023 gives us a hint about what happened that night and who may have witnessed by seeing or hearing certain things. And I don't think that's what they intended to do, or maybe it is. We don't really know. But anyway, that motion that they filed did shed some light on the reality of what happened that we would not otherwise know in light of the gag order, and this is why. So if it was the case that Bethany Funke was asleep during the time of the crime and she didn't hear or see anything, then that Bryan Kohberger's defense's assertions that Bethany Funke was in possession of exculpatory evidence would be absolutely bogus. It couldn't possibly be true. How could somebody have exculpatory evidence when they were sound asleep at the time that they were supposed to be gathering evidence? Even to say, as the defense team did, that Bethany Funke was a material witness that heard and saw things that were exclusive to her experience would make no sense if she was sound asleep. And since we know that attorneys need to file motions and make statements based on a good faith basis, that they can't just throw things out there to see if they stick, we have to assume that Bryan Kohberger's defense team did not truly believe that Bethany Funke was sound asleep at the time of the tragedy, yet they filed a motion out of nowhere that they knew would shock everybody, compelling her testimony in the pretrial hearing on the basis of the fact that she was a material witness who might be in possession of exculpatory evidence, right? Unless Ann Taylor wants to be putting her license to practice law on the line, that must be the case. Therefore, we know, by the virtue of that motion from the defense existing, that Bethany Funke was not asleep at the time of the murders and that she did, in fact, hear and or see something that matters. We know that. From April of 2023, when that motion to compel Bethany Funke's testimony was submitted to court, we're now going to October of 2023, and this has to do with Steve Gonsalves. And also some frat boys. Steve Gonsalves both confirmed and revealed some details about Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke. Kelly's father, Steve, confirmed for all of the world that Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke were in fact in communication around the time of the murders on November 13th in those early morning hours. And in the midst of conversation, these guys let me know that they themselves and their group of friends and many of the students who they know at the University of Idaho who are on campus are aware of what Bethany Funke witnessed in that early morning on November 13th. And I heard him say it again and I was like, what? And they're like, oh, y'all like out there and like the rest of the world don't know that? So as my discussion with these two sources continued, we kind of figured it out. Learned that what they know and what the rest of the world knew was two different things. And what they know to be due to their proximity to the case and to the people involved. And don't worry, we are going to get into all of those details in just a little bit. Hold on. Excludes the possibility of Bethany Funke having any exculpatory evidence as it pertains to those early morning hours. In fact, I think the reason that Ann Taylor hired that investigator, Richard Batanti, is so that he could author that motion to compel Bethany Funke's testimony, because Ann Taylor did not want to put her name on that document. You know why? It was legal bullshit. Not like outright lies, but just legal bullshit. You know, like saying that Bethany Funke was a material witness because her experience is her own and nobody can offer the same information as to what Bethany Funke saw and heard. Of course, you can say that theoretically about any human being, you know, witnessing anything in the world. It was total legal bullshit. So here's what's really important about this idea of Bethany Funke having exculpatory evidence. It has become clear to me that the defense's motion to compel was a big bluff. And it was their first big bluff, as far as I can remember. It was the first time that we saw real evidence. It was a hard in, an all in of the defense's willingness to play games in the pretrial proceedings and in open court. At the time they filed the motion to compel, they were also under some pressure to get an alibi out there. What was Bryan Kohberger doing anyway? When, where, and with whom if he wasn't committing the murders? And knowing there was no way that they could put forth an alibi for Bryan Kohberger without knowing exactly what Bethany Funke was going to testify to when the day of the trial came, what she was going to say when she was deposed before the trial, they had to know that before they could put forth an alibi. Because what if her testimony was in direct contradiction to Bryan Kohberger's alibi? What were they going to do then? As far as the defense was concerned, there were big stakes riding on Bethany Funke's testimony. What did she witness? What was it she saw? What did she hear? And they needed to extract that information from her and get it out of the way so they could move forward with doing what they had to do, which at that time, tell the world what Bryan Kohberger's alibi was in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. Now, if you've been watching any of the pre-trial hearings, or if you've been, listening to recaps on them, you'll know that in several of those hearings, there was this really not productive banter between the state and the defense and judge about the alibi. When was the alibi due? Was the alibi late? Could he still submit an alibi? Did he submit an alibi? Did the alibi that he submitted, satisfy the requirements of what an alibi should be, which should be, a place, a time, and who are the people who witnessed me being in that place at that time. Now, Bryan Kohberger kind of has one of those down, sort of, and that is kind of a time. But as to a place specifically, or people witnessing him being there in any way, shape, or form, he ain't got none of that.
There's been an ongoing discussion beginning most recently with the state's request for scheduling order, and I believe Ms. Taylor briefly addressed it at the last hearing. There's been an ongoing discussion about the alibi deadline, and the state is asking the court to either limit the defendant to presenting evidence about the disclosure that he made related to the alibi, which was that he was driving around the night of the homicides, but not allowing any further discussion or evidence of an alibi, given the amount of time that has passed since the state requested that alibi disclosure. Alternatively, since it was in the court's scheduling order initially prior to the trial getting vacated, we would ask the court to set a 10-day deadline now. I think at this point, there has been so much time that has passed, and it has frankly causes the state great alarm that the defense is discussing calling upwards of 400 witnesses during the innocence phase when we potentially don't have a full alibi disclosure. And when you look at cases regarding appeals from issues that arise during alibis that come up at trial, these cases are all defendants appealing a conviction because the state doesn't get a second chance. If the state gets ambushed at trial, that's it for us. We're asking the court to hold the defendant to a fair alibi deadline, and I think that the time has come. Thank you.
My understanding was that was it, but I may be wrong. Ms. Taylor.
No. All right, now check this out, y'all. To what Ann Taylor has to say here. I actually made a video about this. I couldn't believe it when I was watching this hearing live and I heard this being said. See if you catch the same thing I caught about a little slip up Ann Taylor made here. Now, keep in mind, this is about a full year after the motion to compel Bethany Funke's testimony at the pre-trial hearing that never happened was filed.
No. When the court vacated the trial setting, the court vacated all of the deadlines, including the alibi deadline. That wasn't carved out as one that was still held through when the court vacated the rest of its scheduling order. So I don't think that we're foreclosed from that. The court also has the ability to give an extension besides the limited time by statute. In this case, it's more than Bryan was just driving around. We have let the state and the court know that we expect that will be supported by expert testimony and by cross-examination of the state's experts. I need their full cast report and the rest of the discovery related to that before I can say more about that. So to tie me to a deadline when I don't have the rest of the discovery that I've been waiting for that would relate to that will mean that I will be back asking the court to reopen it. My expert can't finish until I get the rest of the discovery as well.
And the discovery you're talking about is a video of the car?
No.
What do you
So the video that we talk about is one that I think the state's going to use in its case that I don't have full video on, that I'm not talking about any video of Bryan's car. When I'm talking about an alibi defense, unless there's video that shows it elsewhere that I haven't gotten to yet, which may be possible given the fact that there's a lot I haven't seen yet.
Yeah. Yikes. Ann Taylor. Yikes.
What I'm talking about, though, is the cast report, the drive testing information.
Cast report meaning the identification of the particular car.
That is the cell tower information.
I'm with you.
So what that is going to show and what the drive testing data is going to show and what other reports related to that are going to be things that my expert needs to finish our investigation and things that I need to formulate my cross-examination against the state's expert. So when I'm telling you that I'm going to do those things in alibi, I can't tell you more than that right now, but that's how we're going to support Bryan's alibi, that he was out driving that night.
I'm going to kick it back to the state.
Your Honor, I guess I'm a little confused because
I obviously am too. So,
okay. I'm confused because if the defendant's alibi is that he was out driving around that night, I'm not sure what additional information his cell data could add to an actual alibi defense. It seems like what the defense is asking for, and they're being completely upfront about it, and I appreciate that. But what they're asking to do is essentially double check all the discovery before disclosing their alibi, and that's not what the purpose of an alibi deadline is. In fact, it's quite the opposite. There is case law that describes that given the ease with which an individual could fabricate an alibi, and certainly that's not what the state is accusing the defendant of doing. I'm using language that is in case law, though. Given the ease with which an individual can fabricate an alibi, that is a very legitimate deadline. It's a reasonable deadline. It's a reasonable demand of the litigation process. There is a reason why there is a 10-day deadline in the statute, and that is because the defendant is able to tell his counsel where he was that night. They can work together and formulate a defense, and they can disclose an alibi. That is the whole purpose of an alibi deadline. The state has complied with the discovery up to this point. We will continue to comply with discovery. We are disclosing everything that we have to the defense when we get it, unless there's some protective order issue. We are asking that the court hold the defense to a fair standard that has been set forth in this statute, and that is constitutional under the United States Constitution and the Idaho's Constitution, that has been repeatedly upheld by the United States Supreme Court and the Idaho Supreme Court. Thank you.
Now, what do all of you out there think about kind of all of this confusion that's going on in this banter between the judge and the state and the defense? And what do you think about the long delay in the defense putting forth Bryan Kohberger's alibi? Leave a comment down below in the comment section letting us know what you think. And let's turn our attention back to what happened between Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. It makes sense since Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke are the two surviving roommates who lived in that home. They are what we believe really strongly to be the two closest witnesses who witnessed the most. So it's not shocking to say that it's going to be their testimony and what they witnessed that is going to make or break this case. Well, I think that will certainly be the situation, along with a boatload of cellular data and evidence that we are probably all going to be astonished by when it comes to the trial. But I think that from the very beginning up until today and moving forward, the defense is strongly on a daily basis contending with the idea of what will Dylan and Bethany Funke testify in court, and particularly that is true for Bethany Funke's testimony. We can look back to the very beginning of the case when there was not even a suspect named or in the minds of authorities, and there were so many questions out there, and most of us had the same key questions to begin with.
Who called 911? We're learning that the caller was not either of the two roommates who live in the house and apparently slept through the massacre. So the mystery is, who did make that 911 call to police, and how did that person make the gruesome discovery? I spoke with County Prosecutor Bill Thompson.
It's an essential part of the case. Whoever discovered the scene first, whoever initiated the contact with law enforcement is all part of understanding what occurred and the timeline of what occurred.
He told me the two roommates may have critical information.
The investigators are already talking to them and trying to get from them everything they can possibly remember about what they may have seen, what they may have heard, what their activities were, what they know about the activities of their housemates.
According to what we've learned from students at the University of Idaho, it is a known fact, quote unquote, among the university community, or at least among the students or this group of students, that the exculpatory evidence that Bethany Funke has very much to do with her being on the first floor and with what she saw that early morning, in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. According to these student sources, the belief that this channel has, and the belief that a lot of people have, that is corroborated by a couple of the victims' families, being Chrissy Gonsalves and someone from Ethan Chapin's family through a Reddit post, we believe that Dylan Mortensen called all of the roommates that night when she was alarmed due to what she heard and what she saw as described in the probable cause affidavit. What she heard and what she saw that caused her to look out of her bedroom door 3 times and then ultimately lock herself in her bedroom in a frozen shock phase. According to the probable cause affidavit, this is what Dylan Mortensen saw the 3rd time she peeked out her door. It says Dylan Mortensen stated she opened her door for a third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. Dylan Mortensen described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past Dylan Mortensen as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. Dylan Mortensen locked herself in her room after seeing the male. Dylan Mortensen stated that she did not recognize the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. According to the students from the University of Idaho, what Bethany Funke saw in those early morning hours corroborates the fact that Dylan Mortensen called all of her roommates when she was alarmed by what she heard and ultimately what she saw. Apparently, Bethany Funke was awoken as well by the noise that she heard, or maybe she was awoken by Dylan Mortensen contacting her on her phone. We are really not sure, but what is known is that Bethany Funke looked out of her bedroom window from the first floor, and what she saw was a man walking away from the 1122 King Road house, dressed in the same manner as the man clad in black that Dylan Mortensen saw outside her bedroom door. Now, this is as far as Bethany could tell from her perspective. So the story goes like this. Bethany, looking out the window of her bedroom, which is this bedroom right here. If you've seen the 360 tour of 1122 King Road, the bedroom is labeled 1A. So if you're looking out Bethany Funke's window from her bedroom, now note that her bedroom is right beneath the living room. If she were in the other first floor bedroom, bedroom 1B, that would be right below Xana Kernodle's bedroom. But the bedroom Bethany Funke was in was 1A, so she's looking out the window from the first floor that is beneath the living room of 1122 King Road. While looking out that window, and I know that this could be a little hard to understand, but just bear with me. I've been trying to visualize it and I'm trying to map it out for y'all. She saw him walking more or less diagonal across the parking area that is in front of the house, that is, outside of her bedroom window and the other first floor bedroom window. But she saw primarily the back and some of the side of his body as though he was walking towards Queen Row. And guys, we have to remember it is very dark at this time of night here. And by the way, who is he in the story? He is the person that she saw walking outside of 1122 King Road that matched the description of the person that Dylan Mortensen saw inside 1122 King Road, just outside her bedroom door, as the probable cause affidavit describes. So the question is, how did Bethany Funke know at this time that she was seeing a man in black walking outside of their house that matched the description as far as what he was wearing and some other characteristics as the man Dylan Mortensen saw inside their house outside of her bedroom door? That is because, as the story goes, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke were in communication. Dylan Mortensen contacted her in a panic, very alarmed, concerned about what was going on, wanted to talk to her to see if anything strange was happening in her area of the house, and apparently they exchanged stories. I am aware this lends to a whole host of questions. During a recent live stream, we discussed, well, oh my gosh, why then didn't they call 911 right away? This makes that all the more alarming. That was the reaction that some people had right away. But my take on it is, through conversing, the two roommates sort of, comforted each other and justified the fact that they each saw a strange person, one inside of the house, right outside her bedroom door, dressed in black, obviously scared her if she ended up in a frozen shock phase. And apparently, from the story I've been told, Bethany Funke was also alarmed by what she saw. And through discussing this, as you know, you could imagine this is human nature. You're scared. You want to get rid of the fear. You want to get rid of the threat. The threat is the fear. So talking to a trusted friend, you rationalize what you saw, and then in your mind, in that moment, everything is okay. At least, guys, that's how I'm thinking about this. In addition to Steve Gonsalves' statement that we already spoke about, saying that he knows that Bethany and Dylan were in contact around the time of the murders, what other evidence do we have corroborating this story? Let's take a look at it. Mrs. Gonsalves, Kaylee's mother, contacted a channel called The Drunk Turkey Show and shared with the creators some details of her experience and what she knows from the perspective of the victims' families. So in talking to the Drunk Turkey Show, Mrs. Gonsalves makes a reference to the probable cause affidavit and the estimated time of the attack according to the probable cause affidavit. So that's going to be the part of the PCA where law enforcement outlines these three things as helping them to identify the time that the murders occurred. Dylan Mortensen's statements to investigators, forensic downloads of Dylan and Bethany's phones, and the video of the car in the area that appeared unusual. So what Kelly's mother shared with Daniel from the Drunk Turkey Show that she had not spoken about before, and surprisingly, neither had her husband Steve, was that she had been made aware that after Dylan Mortensen saw that figure clad in black and heard all of the things she heard and was, according to her, in a frozen shock phase, she called all of the roommates in the house to check up on them to see what was going on, if they were okay, because obviously she was very alarmed. Here's some more corroborating evidence from a different source. It was reported by the Daily Mail in February of 2023, so that's the February after the November of the tragedy, that members of the Chapin family were questioning why it took so long for 911 to be called, and in telling their story, more information was revealed. Here's a headline. It says, "Family of Idaho murder victim Ethan Chapin questioned why surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen didn't call the cops after hearing crying and screaming, and claims she called all of the girls in the house rather than 911. So the claim here that is made by some members of the Chapin family is very much in line with what Christy Gonsalves said to the Drunk Turkey Show, that, well, the simple fact that Dylan Mortensen called all of the roommates because she was alarmed, she was scared. I'm not sure what the word is because we don't know too many details about how she was feeling truly. All we've heard is frozen shock phase. And both of those accounts corroborate what Steve Gonsalves said about the roommates, Dylan and Bethany, being in contact with one another around the time of the murders. And all of those accounts corroborate what I learned from the two student sources that I've been in touch with since right after this tragedy happened, that it is well known that Dylan and Bethany were in touch with one another, and additionally, what it was that Bethany Funke witnessed in those early morning hours. It is certain to be a long year that we will be waiting before the trial of Bryan Kohberger begins, and all along, we will be watching exactly what happens to ensure that the victims, Kelly Gonsalves, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle, receive justice, and that their families also get what they deserve. May the victims rest in peace, and we hope for a greater sense of peace and quality of life for their family members, who must be in absolute agony right now. We pray for all of them.